Okay, I cannot tell you how many comments I've had saying, "Oh, Mason, let's see your best 2022 team that you've drafted." And I will say we have some pretty strong monsters back from May, back from June. But in reality, I don't know how that's going to help you out. I don't know how it's going to help you out for me to go show you some drafts where we have KJ Hamler in the 18th round, where we were able to pick up some nasty 8th round Michael Thomas shares. But instead, I'm going to look at a recent draft that I've done that I honestly love. I think we have elite level running backs. We have elite level receiver upside. Now, the floor with these guys is going to be pretty low. We have some top end tight ends. We have elite quarterback. We're strong across the board. But before we get into this, please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If y'all don't know, if we hit 90,000 subscribers this season, we will go ahead. We'll fire up a 24-hour live stream draft with us grinding these drafts off nonstop. So please make sure you take advantage of that. Let's dive right into this. This, of course, is going to be an underdog draft where we pulled the 8 pick. And honestly, I usually don't like pick 8 because from pick 8, you're not going to have access to one of the top 5 players and you have no chance of getting them. I've seen Jamar Chase fall to pick 8 maybe in 5 drafts that I've done out of the 500 drafts I've done this offseason. I really want to come away with a Christian McCaffrey, a Jonathan Taylor, a Jefferson, a Chase. But at pick 8, you're not going to get those guys. Now, I know a lot of people watching this video that are maybe casual fantasy football players. They think that Derrick Henry in the first round is a smash pick. They think you should be going Derrick Henry as a top 3 pick. Now, what I will say is, hell, at pick 8, I'm completely fine with Derrick Henry. Of course, that's who we end up taking here. I think that there's 2 completely different sides of fantasy football. You have the data nerds that are just so focused in on their small little bubble where they think that Derrick Henry shouldn't be drafted inside the top 12. And you have the people that just think, oh, Derrick Henry big, Derrick Henry strong, Derrick Henry fast, and they think Derrick Henry should be the first player overall. In reality, I think that you can look at Derrick Henry as an option with an elite level ceiling on a week-to-week basis, but there are glaring red flags with the profile considering the drop-off in efficiency the Tennessee Titans offense has had in games where A.J. Brown misses, considering the fact this is the worst offensive line Derrick Henry's had over the past 5 years. Also, he's 28 years old. He's coming off an injured season. So there are a lot of red flags with Derrick Henry, but at pick 8, the upside is worth the shot. And this is where his ADP actually is on Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, Derrick Henry has an ADP of pick 9 because the people who draft on Underdog Fantasy definitely fall more in line with the numbers crowd, not the guys drafting Derrick Henry inside the top 3. But let's go down to our second round selection. And here I know I have been adamant telling you that you should be taking Aaron Jones over DeAndre Swift. That's why I have Aaron Jones in almost 10% of my fantasy football leagues this year. And I have DeAndre Swift when he's going at the very beginning of the second, sometimes sneaking into the end of the first round. I have DeAndre Swift in less than 5% of leagues. So I go DeAndre Swift in the second here. I view him and Aaron Jones almost as identical picks, if I'm going to be completely honest. Figured, hell, let's just be a little bit more balanced. Let's go DeAndre Swift to pick 17. This is a running back playing behind an elite offensive line. This is a running back that's one of the best passing down running backs in the entire NFL. There are some red flags considering the lack of overall red zone opportunities that there'll be for the Detroit Lions. That's why in a vacuum, if I was only going to draft one fantasy football draft and that's it, I still go Aaron Jones over DeAndre Swift given the touchdown upside. But here we go DeAndre Swift in this draft. And then in the third round, what you really need to worry about on Underdog Fantasy is getting boxed out of the wide receiver position. I mean, on Underdog, you can convince yourself that you're finding a fantastic running back value in every single round, and all of a sudden, you're in the 6th round and there are no wide receivers left. There are no wide receivers that have access to upside. And you're like, what have I done? Because I have to start 3 wide receivers every single week here. So we get really lucky. We actually get Keenan Allen falling to us in round 3. I personally have Keenan Allen ranked as the wide receiver 10 this season. I think Keenan Allen is a unique player where he's being drafted, I want to say, closer to his floor than his true ceiling. Of course, Keenan Allen should have a significantly lower touchdown rate than a Mike Williams in this offense, but at the same time, Keenan Allen is averaging 10 targets a game over the past 3 seasons. He has Justin Herbert at quarterback. There should be really no concerns with Allen here in the third. So we're going to go ahead. We are going to bring in our wide receiver 1 here. And on Underdog Fantasy, that's so crucial. If you get boxed out of the wide receiver position, you're going to be put in a very bad spot because you have to start 3 of these guys. And of course, if you want to go draft on Underdog Fantasy, you can do so with the link in the description, the link in the comment section. Y'all know we draft on Underdog Fantasy every single day, every single night in the live stream. So you can go and get in some drafts with me. And when you use promo code FLOCK to sign up for Underdog Fantasy, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You'll get our 2022 rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. Yes, with a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy, you will get 300 pages of our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. So make sure you take advantage of that. And while you were taking advantage of that, what I ended up taking advantage of is the value that we had with Travis Etienne making it back to us at pick 41. With Etienne, I used to think that he was a great pick at the end of the 3rd round before the James Robinson PUP news. But now that it looks like James Robinson is going to be a little bit more healthy this upcoming season than we initially thought with the torn Achilles, late round 3, Travis Etienne, I'm not in love with, but at pick 41, you got to take the man. We know that he is a very similar to DeAndre Swift. This is what we were talking about all last offseason, and that these are running backs that are going to get every single target out of their backfield and every single touch in the red zone as well. So no, they're not Dalvin Cook. They're not prime Ezekiel Elliott. They're not going to get every touch out of their backfield, but they should see every high value touch out of their backfield. And Trevor Lawrence had the highest check down rate among all NFL quarterbacks last season. That's good for Travis Etienne. Now going to round 5, I didn't exactly know what to expect. I didn't know if we wanted to go ahead, maybe take another wide receiver value because, hell, we only have Keenan Allen through the first 4 rounds here. Like I said, you have to start 3 wide receivers. So these guys are 100% going to slide up this draft board. But all of a sudden, we have George Kittle sliding to us at the end of the 5th round. I've talked about this in depth. We made an entire video about this. But at the tight end position, it's a very simple thing to go out there and just crush your league mates in expected value. You either go ahead, take a tight end that has access to a top 3 finish or possibly the tight end 1 overall finish, or you wait until the very end of the draft. There's no in between. You don't need to be drafting the guys like Dawson Knox, Irv Smith Jr., Cole Kmet at the very top of that tier. If you're going to miss out on a George Kittle, you just wait until you get Robert Tonyan with your last pick. But no, George Kittle has the overall ceiling to be the tight end 1 in fantasy. I know that you're not going to believe me with this, but George Kittle may, in fact, be the most talented tight end in the NFL while healthy. Now, I know that's a very bold claim, but let me go through and show you George Kittle's yards per route run over the past 3 seasons. If you don't know what that means, it's very simple. If George Kittle, say, has 100 yards in a game and he ran 50 routes, that means George Kittle had 2 yards per route run, which is a great mark. I mean, 2 yards per route run is fantastic. Over the past 3 years, Travis Kelce's had 2.4 yards per route run. I mean, you're looking at Mark Andrews as an elite level guy as well with 2.5 yards per route run. Darren Waller, 2.2. Like, those are elite level tight ends. George Kittle's at over 3 yards per route run. Some running backs can't even get to 3 yards per carry. We're not talking yards per target, yards per route run. George Kittle is one of the most efficient tight ends the NFL has ever seen. If all of a sudden he can stay healthy through the course of an entire season, Lance maybe locks onto him over the middle. Wheels up for George Kittle. Getting him in the 5th is a no-brainer. And in the 6th round, I thought we were going receiver. I mean, here we're sitting 5 rounds in on Underdog with only 1 wide receiver in Keenan Allen. But we are just going to continue to go best player available. We have Kyler Murray fall to us in the 6th round. Like, we've had some crazy Arizona Cardinals values as of late. I don't know why. Maybe people really think that there's some drama stirring up in Arizona. But Kyler Murray falling to pick 65 is going to give us access to a quarterback that has the potential quarterback 1 overall finish in his range of outcomes. I mean, we know Arizona is one of the very few teams that we can confidently project to have a top 3 pace of play and be at the very top of the NFL as well in passing rate over expectation. You have those offenses like the Bucks, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, the Chiefs, the Bills. Those are the teams that we really know are going to check both of those boxes. Kyler also has rushing upside. Kyler Murray here is a no-brainer, but when we do take Kyler and we didn't take Hollywood earlier, we have to make sure that we are going to try to get either Rondale Moore or Zach Ertz to try to bring in some correlation with this Arizona Cardinals offense. But in the 7th round, usually at wide receiver, it's so hard to find someone with true league-winning upside. In the 7th round, usually you're going to be looking at guys like Christian Kirk, Hunter Renfrow. I mean, Kadarius Toney doesn't even make it this far anymore. So you need a little bit of luck to happen. Of course, I've drafted over 500 teams on Underdog Fantasy, guys. I've been unlucky in a lot of drafts. I've been very lucky in a lot of drafts. This was one of those drafts where we did get lucky. We had Drake London, the wide receiver 1 in this draft class, falling to us at pick 80. Drake London, in my opinion, does have that elite level ceiling. We were talking about him as a must-draft player at the very beginning of the 7th round, let alone getting him at pick 80 here, where we are desperately needing a second wide receiver to pair alongside Keenan Allen. This is where we begin to piece together our wide receiver core. And then in the following round, I thought we were going to go ahead. I thought we were going to reach on a player like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I thought we were going to possibly take a value in either Christian Kirk or Hunter Renfrow if they made it back to us. But those guys were already off the board. And one player that slid way too far was Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow makes it back to us in the 8th round. Now, of course, if you're not playing on Underdog Fantasy, if it's not a best ball format, you take Kyler Murray and you're not drafting another quarterback the rest of the draft. But because this was best ball and you don't have to submit that starting lineup and we can take random spike weeks from both Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow, we have to go ahead. We have to take Joe Burrow here. I mean, it's freaking pick 89. You're never going to get the opportunity to have this kind of value again. And with this selection of Joe Burrow, it definitely means that we have to target Tyler Boyd, maybe even have to look at a Hayden Hurst a little bit later on. Because remember, you want to be stacking. If we want to hit an elite level ceiling, if Joe Burrow does become a league-winning player here, the Cincinnati Bengals have to be a top 3 NFL team in overall passing yards. If that happens, some of these Cincinnati Bengals pass catchers are going to be hitting their ADP, and we don't have anybody up until this point, so we definitely need to be loading up Tyler Boyd in our queue. And Tyler Boyd usually goes around pick 106, 107, so it's not a guarantee that we get him. This goes right back to having to have some drafts go your way versus avoiding that bad luck. And here we avoid that bad luck. We end up getting Tyler Boyd falling to us at pick 104. We go ahead, we take Tyler Boyd, and I thought we were going to get Rondale Moore on the way back around because Zach Ertz has an ADP of about 108. I never draft Zach Ertz here, but we have to take someone for the Arizona Cardinals. Zach Ertz makes it back. Zach Ertz falls beyond his ADP. We're breaking our rule here. I'll admit it. Yes, we're breaking our rule. Instead of waiting 50 picks and just getting Robert Tonyan at the very end, instead of just waiting 50, 60 picks and getting Tyler Higbee, we take one of these tight ends in no man's land because we need that correlation with Kyler Murray. We get him behind his ADP at a value. I'm fine with Zach Ertz. But at this point, what we are still in need of, once we have the elite level quarterbacks, the elite level running back play, the elite level tight ends, we still need wide receivers. We're only sitting with Keenan Allen, Drake London, and Tyler Boyd. So we do have access to upside with London. But this was a $5 puppy draft on Underdog Fantasy. If you don't know how that works, this was a $5 buy-in where first place gets paid in this 12-team league, second place gets paid in this 12-team league, but a small percentage of every single league pot is set aside for the massive fantasy football tournament at the very end of the season, where weeks 15, 16, and 17 are going to matter so much. You need to access that elite level upside during that fantasy football playoff stretch. So our next 2 picks, we decided to take guys that maybe aren't going to be productive at the very beginning of the season, but by the time we get to the end of the year, they could see some massive spike weeks, given the fact that they are a part of elite level offenses. And not only are they a part of elite level offenses, they have clear paths to being every down players in said offenses. So we go ahead, we take Christian Watson, 128. I know a lot of people don't agree with the Christian Watson selection. Like if you go through, if you look at his ADP and compare it to Romeo Doubs, it's the cool thing. Like if you're not coming out on your podcast and going, oh, I think Romeo Doubs could actually outscore Christian Watson, and then you're not a part of the cool kids club. You're not a part of the Romeo Doubs fan club, which gets you access to having an analyst card. Guys, I'm going to be looking at the wide receiver that was a much more productive player in college. If we're accounting for the offense that he was playing in, look at that percent of their team's receiving yards on a per game basis. Christian Watson was better. We're going to take the elite level athlete. We're going to take the guy that was drafted at the very top end of the second round compared to being a day 3 pick. Christian Watson's better than Romeo Doubs. I understand it's the cool thing to go out there and say it's the opposite. No, it's Christian Watson. Sometimes it's simple. So we go Christian Watson. I still think he has the upside to potentially be the wide receiver 1 there in Green Bay. And then afterwards, we take Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup in 2019, in his second season in the NFL, before CeeDee Lamb came back over to Dallas, this was a wide receiver that averaged more targets per game and more receiving yards per game than Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup is a stud. Look at the contract. Thomas, please throw it up here. Look at the contract the Dallas Cowboys decided to give Michael Gallup just to let Amari Cooper essentially walk. They got Amari Cooper off this team for legitimately nothing. The reason they wanted to do that is so they could pay Michael Gallup. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what happened. I'm buying into Michael Gallup at this price tag. Our next wide receiver, we need someone that's going to have a role right away. We need someone that's going to be able to draw targets. So might as well take a wide receiver that had 110 of those targets last year. We do take Robbie Anderson here, just trying to find someone that can plug and play at our wide receiver 3 at the beginning portion of the season until we have a Gallup, until we have a Christian Watson come on. And then on the way back around, we just go right back to the well in trying to find access to elite level ceilings down the stretch. We sacrificed a wide receiver upside at the very beginning of this draft so we could go ahead. We could take Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, George Kittle, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Zach Ertz. Like, we passed on so many wide receivers early on that the only way this team has access to that $200,000 prize, the true league-breaking upside, is going to be with the rookie wide receiver in Jameson Williams here. Y'all know if you're looking at Jameson Williams from a dynasty perspective, I thought he was overvalued. I looked at people trying to pump him up over Drake London, Treylon Burks. People were trying to put him over Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. We were saying that he was a bad pick in dynasty. But here, if you're getting him at pick 161, while yes, he's going to miss the beginning portion of the season, very similar to Michael Gallup, this is a fantastic price point. Compare him to, say, a wide receiver that goes in the 7th round of this draft in Allen Lazard. From weeks 9 through 17, I'm not going to be surprised if you have more points from Jameson Williams. Now, our next 2 picks, we already have such a high floor and ceiling combination with our running backs in this room, so I don't necessarily feel the need to just load on a ton more running back touches here. Like, we're going to be able to rely on Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne. We do take Darrell Williams as a running back that I do think will have a small role on a week-to-week basis, playing alongside James Conner in this Arizona Cardinals offense. Keep in mind, we took Kyler Murray, and the only other Cardinal that we have is Zach Ertz, so it'd be nice if we could somehow try to find any correlation here. So going with a running back that fits our build also gives us access to a ceiling if James Conner were to go down. I think that pick makes a lot of sense at 176. Then our following selection, we just need someone with a high floor. Hell, we already have the elite level ceilings with those guys we talked about at the very beginning. So we decided to go J.D. McKissic as someone that we know is going to be the passing down running back in Washington this upcoming season. He is someone that will provide us just a floor on a week-to-week basis. Say if we have a Derrick Henry injury for 3 weeks, we have a DeAndre Swift injury for a month, whatever it may be. J.D. McKissic's a running back that the Buffalo Bills tried to sign in free agency this offseason, and whenever that didn't work out, clearly we saw Washington go for it. Then in our last 2 selections, we wanted to go ahead. We wanted to just bring in more wide receivers because this is a best ball format. Remember, so you don't have to submit your starting lineup every single week. The best starting lineup is automatically submitted for you at the end of the week. So I'm trying to find guys that can randomly pop off for 30 fantasy points. And Will Fuller, in my opinion, is the perfect example of said player. Will Fuller doesn't have a landing spot at the time of this recording. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, Will Fuller's in Green Bay. Will Fuller's in Cleveland. Will Fuller's in Buffalo. Will Fuller's in Baltimore. I don't know where he's going to be. I am very confident that he's going to land with an NFL team. And last time we saw Will Fuller healthy was back in 2020, and he was a top 10 wide receiver on a points per game basis. Yes, that is true. Will Fuller was a top 10 receiver on a points per game basis. Clearly, he's going to miss time, but we have so many wide receivers on this roster that I think it's going to be fine. And then our last selection, Sammy Watkins. I think it's going to be a perfect pick for someone to potentially give us production at the very beginning portion of the season. I am still wanting to go in with my bet that I think Allen Lazard is not the guaranteed wide receiver one here in Green Bay. I don't think that Allen Lazard is going to be the wide receiver coming away with a 25% team target share. So if we're wanting to bet against that, if we're wanting to short that, it's probably a good idea to go and draft Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins on the same team. Because if all of a sudden Allen Lazard is just a guy, as he's always been, and we have Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins as the two alpha wide receivers on the outside, unlikely. That's why we're drafting Sammy Watkins in the 18th round, and you don't have to take him in the 7th round like Allen Lazard. Then we are just printing money, and we have access to that elite level ceiling. So to recap this team, I mean, we're going through with an approach that gives us Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow at quarterback, at running back, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, Darrell Williams, J.D. McKissic. At wide receiver, we have Keenan Allen, Drake London, Tyler Boyd, Christian Watson, Michael Gallup, Robbie Anderson, Jameson Williams, Will Fuller, and Sammy Watkins. But let me know what y'all think of this team. I would love to know your opinion. I appreciate everybody checking out this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I really hope you got something from it. And I hope you have a great day as well.